So I'm going to be talking about some debate bots that I've been trialing in my course, Dangerous Ideas in Science and Society. So I just want to quickly show you some survey data from CMU students because it's a good way to explain the core motivation for all this. So in a survey that I send out over the summer, about 300 students do it. I asked them if they could tell me about a time when they felt like they couldn't express themselves at CMU. They write things like, in a lot of classes I take, everyone is extremely offended by anything that isn't their own view. So it's best to just keep your head down and nod even if you don't agree. I have hundreds of statements like this from CMU students. Many of them tell me they've never had a serious discussion about any of the topics that we discuss in my class with someone who doesn't broadly share their views. And it turns out that's actually why they take my class. So a lot of them answer this question by saying things like they want to discuss ideas that weren't allowed in high school, or to learn not only about their own beliefs, but also those that oppose their beliefs, and to improve their skills communicating, and especially with people who disagree, to accept when they're wrong, and to examine and flesh out their views, because a lot of them don't really know what their views are because they've been deprived of the opportunity to test them out in debate with their friends. So comments like this are only very slightly more likely to come from conservative students. Students, no matter what their political leanings, have, it seems, concluded that the potential benefits of discussing controversial topics are just far outweighed by the potential risks to them socially. I won't tell you too much about this, but basically I find a lot of evidence that students are self-censoring. So no surprise that they're very uncomfortable talking about controversial topics on social media. But more surprising perhaps, classrooms don't look all that different. Only 10% say they're comfortable. Not even in class, outside of class, sorry, do they feel comfortable, in dining halls and dorms and that kind of thing. And a particularly sad result was that fewer than half of our students feel comfortable exploring their views with us, and even more scared, of course, when they know that we can harm them with bad grades. These results actually were from 2021 survey, I think, no, 2022. And this is, and this year, again, I've run a very similar survey and found very similar results. So I think this reveals a very deep pedagogical problem, because if students are never encountering arguments for views that they are inclined to reject, if they're not even aware that objections have been made by thoughtful critics, then in some pretty deep sense, they don't actually understand their own beliefs. This is the sort of problem that I've been trying to address in my class. And I want to tell you today about how I've been using argumentative chatbots to try and do that. So my class is also aims to teach students argumentation, and I use a technique called argument visualization, where they do these problem sets that require them to analyze argumentative texts. In this case, the very first one, which is on speech codes and such like that. So I'm just going to skip some slides here. So this semester, in addition to the filling these things out, they also have to provide their own contributions to the arguments, which might be an example that strengthens the argument or an objection of their own. And that's usually the weakest part of students' work. So they're more than able, they can figure out how to fill in these blanks so as to maintain consistency of language across the, within this map. But when you ask them to actually provide their own arguments, they do a lot less well. So this semester, I decided to trial debate bots in a crossover trial design. So the class was split into half randomly and alternated who got to use the bot. So in this particular assignment, if a student opposed speech codes, bias response teams, trigger warnings, that kind of thing, then the bot would draw on this classic CRT text, words that wound, and also on Eric Posner's pro-speech code arguments, which were the focus of the problem set. If a student is on the other side of those debates, then the bot will argue against them, drawing on J.S. Mill, chapter 2 of on the Liberty of Thought and Discussion, a book by Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, and other texts like that. So the hope was that these discussions would deepen students' understanding of the topics in the readings, and most importantly, also give them a judgment-free place where they could generate and test out ideas and hopefully improve the contributions that they make to the arguments that we explore in class. So like I mentioned, the students are, this is part of a crossover trial. So the graders who are blind to the hypothesis under study have been assessing the problem sets that come in for the normal things that we assess them when grading them, but also for the creativity of the objections or reasons that they provide of their own, and the rigor of the arguments. And you'll see in the instructions that I flashed in front of you a moment ago, I really emphasize that we're not going to be logging this in any way. This data doesn't get used by OpenAI. It goes through the API. And we run it on virtual machines that get totally wiped. So there's absolutely no way we could ever find out what they talked about. So the student feedback is what I wanted to show you mainly today. And it indicates that this intervention, I called the bot, in passing, just as a joke, I called it Robocrates after Socrates. And that caught on in the class. So it's now officially called Robocrates. And the finding has been that it really does seem to deepen their engagement with the arguments and their understanding of the text and the quality of their own original contributions. So this bot is mostly built with just constraining the LLM using prompting, but it also we've also trialed retrieval augmented bots that can draw on the readings and pull in quotations. I usually have to supply the bot with a sort of semi-formalized version of the argument to improve the quality of its argumentation. So it provides students with a really unique opportunity to engage in these kinds of dialectical methods that Socrates championed. So as one student wrote, I used Robocrates to understand the structure of the argument and debated with it to see how it would refute my claims. And this back and forth that they engage in the chats seems to make abstract concepts much more tangible and accessible for them. So it's also facilitated a much deeper engagement with those texts. This student wrote, I used the bot to understand the readings and go deeper into my objections. Yeah, right. So this is a very familiar thing to anyone who's read ancient philosophy, that when you get into these arguments, when you start arguing back and forth with someone who disagrees with you, it seems to really activate your logical superpowers. So students can hone their ability to develop counter arguments through regular debates with this bot. As one student said, I chatted with Robocrates to try and develop my argument against, in this case, it was an argument by Peter Singer. It really does seem to have an ability to foster their critical and analytical approach. It also helps them with generating ideas. As the student wrote, the bot was very useful because I could ask it to expand on ideas and create more points, which the student then integrates into their own argument. And then beyond its educational utility, it has also just reintroduced a lot of joy and playfulness, which I think should be a part of philosophical debates. As the student said, I just debated for the sake of debating. I think I brought it to a checkmate after a solid keyboard clattery 45 minutes. So this experience really resonates with ancient philosophy, where learning was just as much about enjoyment and intellectual stimulation as it was about the pursuit of knowledge. So my hope is that students can get much of the essence of those all-night philosophical arguments in dorm rooms, the kind that most philosophers remember very fondly from college, although some of the old timers have doubted to me whether it was possible to recreate those without the help of mind-bending substances, shall we say. So yeah, that's the student feedback. The data from the trial is not fully analyzed yet. It certainly looks promising, especially on the dimension of whether or not it's improving the originality or creativity of students' argumentation, perhaps more so than the logical rigor of the points that they make. But I think I'm at about 5 minutes now, so I'll just stop there.